everyone, it's Alice, and today is going to be all about books and witches. I've always been fascinated by stories about witches. I've always loved these kinds of books and movies and series, and it's just my favorite thing. So today I thought I would show you some of my favorite books that I've read involving witches, and then I also have a pretty sizable TBR stack with books that I'm really looking forward to that we're also going to take a look at. There is a little bit of a mishmash of genres here, like we have all kinds of different things like historical fiction, contemporary books, paranormal books, all kinds of different things. And we're just going to go through all of it, and we're going to start with my favorites. First, of course, we have a couple of books by Alice Hoffman, who most famously wrote Practical Magic, which I'm sure you've heard of, or you've seen the movie. This follows two Owens sisters who come from a long line of witches, and they grow up in this small Massachusetts town, and they're raised by their aunts. And these women, like this family, is blamed for everything that goes wrong in this town, and all these sisters want to do when they're growing up is just getting out. And they do end up getting out eventually, but the family curse that dooms them in love follows them everywhere. Fate, however, brings them back eventually to the small town. Now, this is just peak nostalgia vibes for me. This has an amazing 90s feeling to it, which makes it really atmospheric, and I love how the story focuses on these sisters and the importance of family and also, of course, love. The magic in here is also really interesting. I really like it. It is more of a background kind of magic where it does work, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not like full frontal like fire magic or whatever. It's not much like witches standing around cauldrons type magic. It's more just there in the background, which I really, really enjoy. I also just really like Alice Hoffman's writing. I think it's just lovely. The second one is called The Rules of Magic, and I should say these books are in the same series, but it's the kind of series where things are relatively loosely related, like we follow different generations of the same family, and you don't necessarily need to read them in order. In this one, we actually follow the story of the aunts that we meet in Practical Magic. And in Practical Magic, they're kind of like background characters, but in here, we get to see their lives and their upbringing. This is set in the 60s and 70s, and again, we follow these siblings who are haunted by the family curse. It's set mostly in New York, and although I love Practical Magic, I would say that I probably prefer this one a little bit because I just felt slightly more connected to it. Again, it's really atmospheric, and again, it has great writing. I will also say I do feel like these books are absolutely perfect for fall. Like, you can read them whenever you want, obviously, but they have like a vibe to them that just make them perfect for autumn. Then we have got one that I'm sure you've heard of. It's the very famous Circe by Madeline Miller. And I just absolutely love this book because Madeline Miller is such a fantastic writer. This is a Greek mythology retelling, and in it we follow Circe, who has the power of witchcraft. And this power really scares her fellow gods, who eventually cast her out. She's sort of banished to this island, and she lives in exile, and we follow her life living on this island where she practices her craft, and although she's very, very lonely, sometimes people will come to this island during different parts of her life. But she is a god, so she lives for a really, really long time. So she is desperately, desperately lonely. And it's just a lovely book, and it's the kind of character where you really end up caring about the main character, even though sometimes she does things that are just horrible. She's a very interesting character to read about. And again, Madeline Miller's writing is just peak. It's so, so beautiful. Next, we have got The Witches of New York by Amy McKay, which is just fantastic. This is historical fiction. It's set in New York in the 1880s, and we meet these two women who open up a tea shop where they not only offer tea, but also cures and palmistry and potions. Then a young woman who is quite mysterious at first seeks employment in the tea shop, and it's clear that she is also touched by magic, although this magic unfortunately comes with a little bit of trouble. I really enjoyed this one. I love the setting, I love the historical period, and I really liked all of the supernatural stuff. I also really ended up caring about the characters. I really like them, even if they're not the most complex characters that I've come across. This is just a very interesting and great read. Then we've got a book that I actually get recommended quite a lot because I don't think anyone realizes that I've actually already read it, because I'm pretty sure I read it before BookTube. It's A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. And I have read the whole trilogy of this, actually. I found this in a bookshop like back in the day and I saw the word witches and I just had to read it. This is a paranormal romance where this scholar ends up calling this like long lost book that is magical, that has been missing for like centuries. And she isn't particularly interested in this book, so she sort of sends it back. But the fact that she was able to call it causes all of these things to happen in the magical world, and all of these creatures start coming after her. So it's about that and her learning that she has powers, and also it's about this vampire that she meets and sort of creates an alliance with. Now, since it's been quite a long time since I read these books, I don't remember that many of like the plot points, but I do remember how the book made me feel. I remember that I really enjoyed the world and all of the magic stuff and learning about that, and the historical parts of it I really enjoyed, and I really liked reading about our main character. I do remember not being super invested in the romance, but it's probably because I'm just generally not super into romance, although it is changing a little bit now. So maybe if I reread it now, I would enjoy it more. But I don't remember that much of the romance. I just remember the main character and all of the magical stuff. And I remember that these books were just very enjoyable to read. They were very entertaining, and it's just perfect escapism. There has also been a show made based on these books, which I haven't watched because, to be totally honest with you, I think it looks kind of cheesy, but maybe I'm wrong. If any of you have watched it and you feel like it's worth a watch, let me know, because then I might try it. Next, we have got a cozy fantasy book. It's The House Witch, and this is just the loveliest book. You can probably tell how cozy it is based on the cover, and this is definitely on the lighter side of these books, and it's just super enjoyable. The story is set in a fantastical land, and we meet this witch who becomes the royal cook at the royal palace, and when he gets there, he's not, like, he doesn't get along with everyone. He's kind of rude, he's not very likable, he's kind of a loner, and he's trying to hide the fact that he has magic. That doesn't stay hidden for very long though, and eventually he makes some friends, he makes some enemies, and there's a lot of intrigue in the castle. And then there's also a war looming in the background, so there's that as well. This is just super cozy. There's loads of food, the setting is great, and the magic is really interesting and cool as well. It is a little bit on the longer side, and it's very clearly like the first book in a series. It doesn't wrap up everything by the end of it, if that makes sense. But I really enjoyed this. It was just the perfect book to stay in and feel cozy in. Then we've got more historical fiction with A Secret History of Witches by Louisa Morgan. And this starts off in England in 1812 and ends around the Second World War. And in between there, we follow 5 generations of mothers and daughters who have this magical inheritance that is both wonderful and dangerous. This is a little bit of a longer book as well. It's definitely a slow burn, but I really like the setup and how the historical backdrop changes throughout the book, and how we follow these different women, and they end up being very different people, and they handle their gift in different ways, and some are definitely more likable than others, but they're all very interesting to read about. I also just really like stories about mothers and daughters. I always think that's very interesting. Next, we have got a short story collection. It's the Virago Book of Witches. And first of all, this is absolutely beautiful. I love this edition. And this is really cool because this has short stories from all over the world, of course, about witches. This is a great book to read if you just want to read a little bit here and there, and we get to meet witches in all kinds of different forms in these stories. Some are sad, some are fun, some are dark, but there is a little bit of something in here for everyone, I feel. I love reading stories from all over the world, and I love reading translated stories, and this is just perfect for that. Last of my favorites before we move on to the TBR, we have The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. And I've saved this for last because this is definitely a wintry book. You can, of course, read whatever you want at any time, but these books are perfect to read in winter. This is set in the Russian wilderness, and we meet a young girl who lives with her family, and they live in a time when it's traditional to sort of honor house spirits, and they do this all the time. It's just ingrained in their routines. And this girl is like the only person who can actually see these spirits, which she doesn't tell anyone because she realizes that no one else can see them. But she can see them, she can talk to them a little bit, and that's cool. But unfortunately, at some point her mother dies and her father goes to Moscow to find a new wife, and he brings her back, and she is super religious. And she wants everyone to stop doing these like old rituals because they don't fit into her religion. And that actually causes some of these spirits to start weakening, which has a lot of consequences. This is one of my absolute favorite fantasy series. Like, all of it is so good. The characters, the magic, the setting, it's just so good. Those were all of my recommendations, which means that we can now move on to the quite big TBR that I have, which I'm so excited about because we're nearing fall and this is the perfect time to read these kinds of books, and I'm just super excited about it. The first one I have that I will definitely be reading this fall is Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman, once again. This is in the same series as the other books, and I feel like, I don't really know what I'm basing this on, but I feel like this is gonna be my favorite. And it's kind of, it's maybe not the best idea to have such high expectations, but I just do. I feel like I'm gonna love this. In this one, we meet the woman who started the family curse. So the very first Owens witch that came to America in 1680, I believe. She comes with a baby in tow, and she's gotten this grimoire from her adoptive mother, I think. And we get to see the origins of the curse and of this family. And it's a story of betrayal and love and magic, and it just sounds so freaking good. There is also, by the way, one more book in the series which I do want to get. I think it's definitely the last book, and it follows the newest generation of witches, and I think the story is sort of about them trying to finally get rid of this curse. I cannot for the life of me remember what that book is called, because although I love this series, these titles are too similar and I can't really tell them apart unless I'm holding the book. But I definitely want to read that as well, whatever it's called. Secondly, we have got a cozy fantasy. It's The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandanna. And so many of you have told me that I'm gonna love this book, so I'm very excited. It follows this witch who is an orphan, and she's very lonely, and she's been taught to hide her magic. But her life changes when she's asked to go to this like mysterious house or something to try and teach some witches how to control their magic. That is all I really know. I'm very much going on everyone's recommendation with this because everyone tells me that I'm gonna love it. And also, I do love a good cozy fantasy, and I do love witches, so I feel like we can't really go wrong with this. It also says on the cover, a warm and witchy hug of a book. And that sounds pretty perfect. Then we have got The League of Gentlewoman Witches by India Holton. And this is technically the second book in a series, but it's the kind of series where, again, you can sort of read them out of order because they're set in the same world, but they don't follow the same characters. The first book in the series, which is so much fun, by the way, the first book follows like a pirate lady scoundrel type person who like steals a bunch of stuff. And this one follows a witch. Our witch in here is a part of a secret society, and they use their magic to tidy and correct and make sure everything is proper based on like the rules of the day, which I'm sure is an enormous task because these books are set in Victorian England and there are a lot of rules to follow. I think like what happens in here is that there's this amulet that is magical and a little dangerous, and the main character has to keep this from falling into the wrong hands. And that's like the beginning of the story. I think she also runs like across a pirate at some point, who I'm sure is very charming. Next, we've got a book that I very recently picked up in a bookshop because I am currently like dipping my toe into the romance pond, which has been interesting so far. I got A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley, and this could be terrible, or it could be super fun, or it could be a combination of both. I don't really know. It follows this witch who I think has been prophesized to be this super powerful being in her family. And maybe she is, but she's more interested in like baking and gardening, which is very sweet. And I think while she's baking one day, she somehow summons a demon, which I'm sure leads to some drama. It sounds fun, and I just hope it's not too terrible. Another one that I picked up on the same bookshop trip actually is In the Shadow Garden by Liz Parker. And this not only looks amazing, it sounds amazing. It's set in Kentucky, and we follow 3 witches of the Haywood family, I believe. And they are known in their town for having a shadow garden where they grow all kinds of different things, and their plants can be used for all kinds of different purposes. Like it can cure heartache, but they also have some plant that they can like make into a bourbon that will make you forget your worst memory, which sounds very handy. There has been tragedy in the past though, unfortunately, and I'm assuming it has something to do with that forgetting thing, because it says that 20 years ago, the entire town forgot a whole summer. And during that summer, someone was murdered and someone went missing. And I think the book sort of explores that, and that's like the mystery of the book. I don't really know, but I think that sounds like a great setup. Then we have got Payback's a Witch by Lana Harper. And I just love this title, even though it's kind of cheesy. I just really like it. This follows a woman who is a witch who comes from a powerful line of witches, but she's not very powerful herself because she hasn't been home to her magical town for quite some time, which I'm assuming that like means that her power lessens a little bit. She sort of exiled herself because of some family issues and also some romantic issues, but she decides to return, I think for some sort of spell casting tournament, and she's gonna represent her family. That brings her back, and I'm guessing there's some drama. I also read something about how she falls in love with this other witch who is like into more dark magic, and I'm here for it. I think that sounds great. Another sort of similar sounding book is Small Town Big Magic by Hazel Beck, which I think that this is kind of like a rom-com, and this is also a rom-com, I'm guessing. It follows a bookshop owner who doesn't believe in magic, she doesn't believe witches are real, but she starts noticing these small things, like weird things happening in her Midwestern town, and she loves her small town. And I think sort of what happens comes from a need or a want to protect her small town. I think some creatures start coming after her because her rival has sent them, and she realizes that she is a witch even though she didn't believe in it or something. I don't know. Sounds great. It has witches and a small town, and that sounds lovely. And I'm assuming there's a romance in here, but I'm gonna have to read it to find out what that is. Lastly, we have a couple of books that are more like historical fiction. We have The Manningtree Witches by A.K. Blakemore, which is set in England in 1643, and it's set in the small village where there aren't a lot of men around because so many of them have gone off to different kinds of wars, and these women are left to fend for themselves, and they have to do everything themselves, which makes them quite independent. And of course, an independent woman without a husband must be a witch, right? At least that's what this priest who comes to town seems to think. And this is like right at the start of the witch trials, I think, so I'm assuming that there's gonna be some drama about that. The last one is sort of set around the same time, a little bit later, I think. It's The Familiars by Stacey Hall, and this follows a noblewoman who is finally with child after having several failed pregnancies. And I think that there's like a prophecy or something, or someone says that she will not survive this pregnancy, which is of course horrible for both her and for her husband. They really want to have a child, and they want to have this child. And I think this noblewoman seeks out a midwife who promises that she can deliver the child safely, but then the midwife is accused of witchcraft. And the story is all about these two women, and they're both running out of time, and it just sounds very, very interesting. I've also had this book for quite some time, and I really need to read it. And every time I look at this book, I see how beautiful it is, and it makes me want to read it. That was the last book though, which means that we have reached the end. Lots and lots of books to show you today, I know, but I just love these kinds of books, and I have so many that I've loved and so many that I'm excited about. I would love to know if you've read any of these books and what you thought, or if you have any cool witch books on your TBR that you're excited about. And also, if you have any recommendations, I would love to hear it. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!